Hi, I'm Nikhil, Cloud Support Associate from Bangalore site. And this module is all about PostgreSQL clients. So let's get started.
The various client tools we will be covering under this module are PSQL, connection using ODBC driver, JDBC driver, DBI module for Perl, PsychObj2 package for Python, PG interface for Ruby, PG admin and SQL developer as the UI tools. Throughout the course of this module, we will be using some document references. You can refer the resources section against each module for further details. Now, before we move on, we need to ensure one thing, that our accessing instances are whitelisted at the RDS level. So you need to add the particular IP addresses in the security group of the RDS. So for example, I am using 3 different EC2 instances that are contained outside the VPC, in fact outside the region. I need to provide the public IP of the EC2 instance. You can in fact provide a security group, or you can provide the private IPs if you're accessing instances within the VPC. So now we are clear on that front. We can go ahead and start installing our setup. So I'll be using a vanilla box with nothing installed. Log into the machine and quickly check here. It's a Linux AMI. Now if I quickly show you the repository lists available within this machine, I can see that we have 2 repositories available and enabled that are the default ones. So based on these repositories, if I list all the packages that start with the string Postgres, I can see I can only have 9.5 version as the latest one. So if you want to have 9.6 or further latest versions, you can go onto the official site to get the RPM package. Copy the link location for Amazon Linux AMI. Okay, so if I ls the directory, I will get the RPM package pgdg. So I will try to install the package on the RPM repository. So it will be sudo rpm-i pgdg, that's Postgres Development Group for short. Now we have installed that, and now if we check the latest packages that can be used with this, so I have 9.62. For pSQL as a client, we would be requiring these 2 packages, the x86-64 version and the contra module. For some reason, if you want to have the Postgres installed as a whole database in the EC2, you can go ahead and install the server version as well. So I will quickly do the yum install for this and this. Now since I have installed the binaries, can run the binary and get the help. Okay, so for pSQL we have some general options, input and output options, some format ones, and the basic connection options. So whenever you have to connect to a database using PSQL as a client, you would be requiring to provide the host name, the port, the username, as well as the database name that you are trying to connect to. So I am using the RDS instance as my server. So the host name would be the endpoint of the RDS instance, a long endpoint, so just have to copy it. Username for that is Nikhil. You can do it anyways you want. Database name would be either Postgres or the one that you have created while the console. And if I simply say this, it will prompt me for password for that, and you're in. So it says I'm using the PSQL 9.6.3 and my server, the RDS instance, is on 9.6.1. So you need to make sure all those versions are in sync. If not, some of the features might work, some of them might not. So within this, you can even run OS level commands. So for those, you have to mention in backslash, exclamation mark, and then your command. Okay, so just quickly go back. These backslash q and many other like backslash dtd are basically meta commands that we will be looking in few moments from now. Just quit out and go back to psql help and start from the top. So -c would give you an option to provide a SQL query right in the PSQL connection string. So you would simply say PSQL -h host -u user -d database and a -c for the command you want to run. If you want to run more than multiple commands, more than one commands, you can provide -f option that will link the file that would have SQL queries one by one and would execute this file accordingly. So after this, you can list the available databases using -l. So instead of saying -c equal to backslash the meta command for databases, you can simply write -l because it's a special thing. You always want to list the available databases within this instance, so it's nice to have this upfront. We have -v for the version of the database, so it will simply return the -9.6. -v would simply return 9.6.3 or something depending on the RDS instance Postgres version. If you want to change the input and output options, like how do you want to show your queries, responses, can simply play around these to get an overview. One thing that is quite interesting in pSQL is that you can specify a PSQL-RC file, which like you can do for a bash. So for that, you need to create vi, create the file. It should be a hidden file, so pSQL-RC, and now I'll be using the resources. So pSQL-RC sample1 would be using. You can all get these in the resources section. Simply copy and paste. It will basically try to change the prompt of the database when we log in. So before we used to have only MyDB as the prompt. Now we used to have the whole identifier, the port, database name, as well as the username. So we can in fact make it more fancy, make it more relevant for actual use cases. For that, I will be using a different sample. First, remove the actual file and try the second sample. So the second sample would be a little bit complicated, but you can get a workaround, you can get a head start what I'm doing if you try and read it and make stuff relevant among themselves. So this would basically use the pg catalog tables, some views, some pgstat activities to set those onto a particular session level variable, and based on these we can basically customize our pSQL experience. So I have the latest version of the pSQL-RC. And now if I try to log in, it will prompt me for password. And now I have changed the prompt. I have a nice fancy server date time. I have administrative queries. I can simply, instead of giving a SQL query that is a long complicated join of few tables, I can simply say con info, give me the connection information, or I can say uptime, will give me the uptime. So these variables in turn contain the actual SQL queries which you will be storing in the actual PSQL RC file, and based on these you can further play around and customize your experience. So with the T-SQL RC done, now I'll be covering the second most important part of T-SQL, is that the PGPass. PGPass is basically a file which will allow you to provide password inline, because if you are trying to write a script that accesses a Postgres database, retrieves some files, retrieves some queries from there, you would not be requiring to provide passwords every time, because it's a whole sequence of running commands. So you need to provide the password inline. So for that you need to first create the file. That's again a hidden file. So .pgpass. Pgpass is the name, and we'll use the sample. So the format is you provide host, port, database name, username, and based on these provided values, you can provide all of those or a single value for host name, and everything else can be star star star. Based on these values, this file will return the password stored. So I've mentioned here my identifier, my port, my database name, and my username. So whenever I provide a connection string with these variables, it will check here, and if all those match, you will get a return from this file, the password value. So you can very well see my password itself is password. That's not very smart thing to do. It's just a demo, so we can in fact ignore. One important thing before we use PGPass is that we have to change the permissions of this file accordingly. So it's done, and now if I run again the help, you can see hyphen small w space no password, never prompt for password. So if you are not prompted for password, you would still be requiring some authentication mechanism. So PGPass would provide that password without any user prompt. So for that we will be basically do a hyphen w here, and it will simply log into your instance without any password prompt, because that password has been already stored in PGPass. Okay, so one other cool thing which I think you would be interested to know is a hyphen e option. That's the extended version of the session. So if I say \d, that's again a meta command, and we will be covering those meta commands in a few moments. So if I say \d, it will list all the relations, basically the tables within the database. So \d is not a SQL query, it's just an abstraction of this query, this complex query, which is there for the user friendliness. So you can in fact learn these to be more efficient instead of writing these queries every time. So hyphen e option that I have mentioned here would simply print all the backend queries along with. So you can in fact, when you move on to the next module, to see you have PG catalogs and some schemas you have some page stat activity tables. So all those would be relevant when you log into your RDS instance or your Postgres instance via the -e option, because you can see how things work in Postgres. You can see how we can join stuff to get the relevant data. So now if I go back and disable the -e option, because it can take up a lot of space on the console screen. So now we finally come to the meta commands. Meta commands, like we have already used \d, \q, and few more. They are a bunch of commands that pSQL provides you as shortcuts. So when you say \l, it will list all the databases available. There's an alternative to this. You can use -l in the connection string itself. That will return the databases in your instance, or you can basically do a -c, and in the equal to code string you can provide the \l option, or the actual command, that actual SQL query that you are trying to run. For that you will be requiring -e option. So ignoring all those, to make things simple, \l would give you the list of databases. So \db similarly will list all the table spaces. One extension that you can find in this option is, like, you can provide plus. So instead of saying \db, you would be saying \db plus. That will give you the extended information, basically description, attributes, and few other information. So if you want to know only the particular information about a particular, say, database, so instead of saying \l plus, you would be saying \l plus and the table name, database name, sorry. So this pattern basically acts as a filter for your output. So using those workflows, we can in fact do a \db and see what happens. We do a \db. Why is this still showing query if I have not enabled -e? Because my pSQL RC itself has an option to print these queries whenever certain command is there. So if I go ahead and delete that pSQL RC or disable it using a connection string option, these won't be there, because I have not explicitly stated -e here in this string. So when I did \db, I get out the table space details. But if I do a \db plus, I'll be getting more details. But the funny thing is, it's an RDS instance, so you don't get to have the more detailed information, uh, because you don't have the root permissions there. So \db plus would simply add the table space size present. So that is somehow considered critical in RDS ecosystem. So it says permission denied for table space PG global. So you can list the PG default, but PG global size, if you try to query the size, or if I using this query, it will show up a permission denied. So if I try to run something simple that won't have permission issues, it's like a list of tables. So \d would return the tables created, the objects basically created in this database. So if I say \d plus, it will have the size and the description attributes as well. And since the owner of those objects is the owner which we are trying to right now connected, that's the user Nikhil, so it is not giving any permission error. Now if I show you the pattern string filtering, so I can see I have a table called my tab. So I will simply say my tab. and it will display the details for my particular table. So interestingly, my table itself has a simple character or varchar, so it will display all those. If you want to have if you have created a trigger for the that is related to the table procedure, it can in fact list those here as well. So all these meta commands can be found at the official Postgres documentation, but I've tried to segregate the relevant stuff, and this document would be available in the actual slide, actual resources, so you can refer those and play around. One important thing that you can in fact do is I'll be using the OS command to clear this stuff. Instead of doing a \d, I'll be using ds. So that will list even the system objects. So D is for your user level objects, and D itself means you will be listing relations. So it means you will be listing relations of the particular user. But if I say \ds, he would be listing the relations of the particular user as well as the system objects, given they are not beyond the permission limits. So you can list stuff. So PG aggregate, you will find PG group here that are within the schema PG catalog that we just saw the first time. So you will get to know all these, what a schema is, what a table is, what a table space is, how users are between all those terminologies. But to play around, this is a nice way to at least get the terminologies in your mind and eventually learn how to play with those. So we have covered psql-rc, pgpass, meta commands, and connection strings. So psql installation steps you can find here, as well as in the documentation. I will be providing a documentation that would be having RHEL commands as well as those for the Ubuntu distributions. Now that we have covered PSQL, we will move on to our next tool called Unix ODBC. Unix ODBC is an implementation of Microsoft standard called ODBC. ODBC is open database connectivity, which allows one to connect n sort of applications to n sort of databases. So there is nothing proprietary in between. So your application can connect to a SQL server, a Postgres database, or any sort of database that is compatible with the standard. So Unix ODBC is an implementation of that standard, which we'll be explaining in this module. So the resources we will be using in this module would be an inst file and a simple ini sample file. So to get started, we will again log into our machine, and to save time, this time I have already created the necessary stuff. So what you all be requiring is to install the latest Postgres binaries as well as the Unix ODBC binaries. After that, you need to create a file odbc-inst.ini, which by default would be created when you install Unix ODBC, but then you need to update it according to your environment. So you need to change the content of this file as per the contents mentioned in the sample resource. So the sample would include definitions of two drivers. First, the Postgres SQL driver, and second, the MySQL driver. You can have a description, the driver location itself, the setup location, and the usage key. So based on these samples, you can see I have created the required files already, and to even see the next file, odbc.ini. It would be here. It describes a sample database with the respective credentials. So database name, the server name, username, password, the port that you want to connect, and the protocol. Make sure you have the right version for the right implementation you are working on. So now that we have set up the Unix ODBC properly, you can go on and log into the machine using our binary. So in the ODBC ini file, which was in the etc directory, I mentioned the DSN name, data source name. So that will be mentioned here, and you're up and running. So if I run some query, activity, list all the options. Okay, so after ODBC we'll come to the Java's implementation of connecting our application to a database using the JDBC driver. You can get the latest JDBC driver from this link. I've already created the sample along with the directories. So you need to install the Java OpenJDK devel that will allow you to compile as well as run your Java files. So it will be a JRE plus JDK that you will be getting with this package. You need to get the latest driver from this link, and then you need to paste the code and you need to compile it. So as you can see in this machine, I already have the Java code, Perl, Python and Ruby code. So if I quickly move on to compile the code, awesome, and then when I run the code I need to specify the class path because I'm using a driver which is in my home EC2 directory along with the name of the driver and the class file. So in the code I mentioned like connect to the database and run a small query returning the connecting IP and the driver name. So if you want to see the sample code, this would be the sample code. So when you try to log in, this is where you get connected. These are all the credentials that you will be requiring, and if everything is connected well and good, run this query, application name, client address from pgstat activity. You can in fact run any such complex query from here, or you can in fact make a full-fledged application based out of Java that you can use to connect. Next we will move on to the DBI module for Perl. So using the Perl language we can even have a connection using their own driver. So I'll just quickly clear this up, and I've already installed the setup. You will get these steps in your documents. So you will have yum install perl dbdpg, that's the DBI module code for Red Hat machines, and you will simply have to run the script. So perl example perl, awesome, same query, same process, results are same. So if you want to see the code, it would be again the same thing, just the syntax changes, some functionalities change, but the end result remains the same. You can even make it more complicated if according to your need. Then the third would be to PsychObj 2 that uses Python libraries. So you need to first install GCC++ for compilation purposes, PostgreSQL Developer for your developer libraries, and the PsychObj 2 package itself using the pip. So if I again run the same file, Python py, same logic, awesome, registered value. Notice some drivers do return their application name, some do not. That again we can tweak as per your requirement. So if I show you the code, again the credentials, the login string, the query, and the output. Okay, so the final one would be a Ruby interface, PG. You can learn more about the module itself and the various syntaxes, the various functions that you can get using the link. The steps would be to install GCC++, again the developer. You also need to have Ruby developer binaries as well, and the PG driver itself. So if I quickly do the same thing, Ruby you gets connected. Make sure you have the EC2 instance whitelisted at the RDSM. So if I do again the same thing, syntax changes, the logic remains same, the query remains same, get the output. Okay, so now that we have covered PSQL, Unix ODBC, Python, Perl, Ruby, and Java's implementation of connecting to a Postgres database, we can now move on to some UI tools. pgadmin is one such UI tool to connecting to your Postgres database and get some insights about the queries that you are running. So to quickly show you the tool, this is the tool. You can simply go on here and create new server, which will then allow you to mention the name, the connection detail that you have already been mentioning in the previous tools, database name, port, the username, and the password. So I have one such connection established here, and as you can see, the tool in the backend accesses the data, queries the PG catalog tables, the various sources, and gets the results in the form of nice UI. So you can in fact have a lot of data from here. The statistics, you can even write SQL queries from here and get the explain, analyze UI representation, the UI plans, the explanation plans actually. So this is a nice way to execute stuff if you feel limited with the normal terminal tools. This is the one that will help you.
The last tool we will be covering in this module would be SQL Developer. Now, SQL Developer is an Oracle-based client used to connect to Oracle databases, but we can in fact use JDBC as a backend mechanism to connect to your Postgres databases. So for that, you need to add a JDBC driver to your SQL Developer tool. For that, you need to go to Tools, Preferences, Database, and the third-party JDBC driver option. From here, you can mention the driver, add entry, and click OK. So for this tool, this version, you need to close the window and reopen it again for the tool to recognize the driver. Once that has been done, you can go on to the can add new connections, you will get a new tab here. Connect on the PostgreSQL tab, or mention your new connection name, new con, mention your username, your password, and your host. So for this tool, you would be requiring to provide the database name here itself along with a question mark. So if I go ahead and test it, I'll get a success code here, and you can go on and very well connect to your new instance. Much like the pgadmin, you can in fact do visual representations of your query plan. You can run queries as well, but that would be very much limited in terms as compared to that of the Oracle database, because this tool is primarily used for Oracle databases. Much of the functionality would be very much limited, but still it can be used for last minute resorts. So we have reached the end of this module. We have looked at a lot of tools that you can use in fact to connect to your database. For further information, for more set of tools, you can go on to this link and get a lot of tools from there. And that's it. That's for the whole demo. If you have further queries, reach me at my alias KHOKHARN, and hope you like the video. Thanks and have a nice day.